and welcome to Stay for Dinner, a podcast of cooking, curiosity, and conversation. If you love cooking, hate cooking, have no idea how you even feel about cooking because you have never tried it before, you are in the right place. I am DC Pierson. I am a comedian, author, and enthusiastic home cook, and I am currently in the great out of doors on the morning of January 1st, 2021. I feel this is like a New Year's edition of the podcast because, I mean, first of all, it's literally New Year's Day, which feels great. And then also I will be making black-eyed peas, which I've never made before. There was a great recipe that the New York Times was really aggressively pushing at me, and I was finally like, I know this is a thing that people do as like a good luck thing for New Year's. I've never done it before. I don't have any particular big New Year's traditions culinarily, so I figured, why not? We can use a little luck for the year, I think, right? Can't we? And more so if we distribute it over podcasting networks. This recipe comes to us. It's from Mashama Bailey, who is a chef at the restaurant Gray in Savannah, Georgia. As it says here in this recipe, it's adapted by Bridget Washington. And this, the black-eyed pea tradition comes by way of the American South, Black American culinary tradition. And I'm excited to try it out. I love making a big pot of beans. I'm kind of always looking for an excuse to do that. And this time I remembered to soak the beans the night before, on New Year's Eve, no less. So I feel pretty good about that. Let's take a quick check of our ingredients before we do anything else. We have 2 pounds of dried black-eyed peas. I got that, like I said. I've already soaked them, so they're not dried anymore, man. 1 sweet onion, such as Vidalia. It says peeled and halved through the root end. We'll be doing that in a second here. 4 whole cloves, got those. 1 garlic head cut in half. I have not cut it in half yet, but I'll do that in a minute. 10 black peppercorns, 2 dried bay leaves. I actually have fresh bay leaves, and I might use even more than that. We'll see. I feel like more flavor. The more flavor, the better. 1 chili de arbol or other small dried chili. I have chilies de arbol, and like I said, I'll probably be using more than one. I'll probably be using a couple. A cup of olive oil. 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. It seems like a lot of olive oil, by the way, or just, I don't think it seems like a lot in terms of the recipe, but obviously, oil can get pricey, but also this is making 12 servings of black-eyed peas, and it's good luck. So we're laying it on the line for 2021. It's worth the oil, I feel. 2 tablespoons of kosher salt plus more to taste, and hot sauce to taste. So let's get started. First step, I already did it. Like I said, put the peas in a large bowl, add water to cover by 2 inches, and soak overnight. I did that. I actually only did like kind of 1 inch of water. I failed to look at the recipe beforehand, and my rule of thumb for soaking beans is usually like 1 inch of water. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe I should have done more. We'll see. So, we'll just have to watch the bean texture. Maybe they'll take a little longer to cook. It points out that the recipe, if you don't throw in any meat stuff, that's not in the ingredient list, this recipe is vegan, which is pretty cool. So first off, we are going to, like I said, slice this onion down in half, keeping the root end attached. So you're cutting it lengthwise, so each side has like a root half. Oh, and the reason I'm outside, I feel like I forgot to even mention that, is that we're going to blacken this onion. The recipe talks about doing it on the stovetop or in the oven. I'm going to do it on the grill so that I don't get the grates of the oven oniony, but shouldn't be that big of a deal either way. It's honestly more of just an excuse to use the grill. And I'm going to I took the peels off, but I'm also going to kind of shave the root ends of the onion a little bit just to remove the kind of weirdo little dried tentacles on the end there. All right, and then once that's done, I am going to char this onion, or blacken the onion rather. It says if you have a gas stove, turn on one burner on high and place the onion halves directly on the grates next to the flame and cook, turning occasionally until the onion is charred on all sides, about 5 minutes. Otherwise, heat the broiler and broil the onion on a baking sheet a few inches from the heat, turning occasionally until charred, 1 to 2 minutes. Again, for me, the route of least mess seemed to be the grill, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to put these onions on the grill right now that is already preheated and raring to go. Already smells fantastic. All right, and I'm going to go ahead, it's been a couple minutes here. Place the onions cut side down first. Gonna check and see how they're looking. Some grill marks could be more charred. I'm gonna leave them be. All right, checking again. And every time I check, I'm just kind of rotating them a little bit. Get more char, etc. And I'm going to do a little bit of multitasking here while I continue to char these onions. And that is to move on to the next step, which is making a sachet with these herbs and aromatics and such. And in the recipe it says, place the garlic, peppercorns, bay leaves, and chili on a 12-inch square of cheesecloth and wrap tightly using twine to seal the packet. I could not easily find cheesecloth, but somebody in the comments said that they did it with a coffee filter, and I do have a coffee filter, so I'm going to give that a try. That seems like a fun DIY idea, if nothing else. First, I'm going to slice the garlic cloves, and that is kind of, I'm going to slice it like parallel to the root. Basically, so you split all of the cloves in half, revealing their insides. It says cut in half. It doesn't specify, but logically, we know what we're going for here. I guess it would be like cutting it in half widthwise, I think is the best way to put it. And then dropping in my chili. I'm ultimately going to use 3 chilies. I don't think that's going to make it crazy spicy. And I'm also going to use more than the 1 bay leaf called for because, like I mentioned, I have fresh bay leaves, and I just feel like in general, fresh stuff, use more of it than dried stuff. And I feel like no matter what, I like that flavor. Oh wow, I just opened this jar of peppercorns and got almost 10 on the first try. I got 11 just by shaking it out into my hand. I'm not going to get too technical about it. That's cool looking. All this stuff in here in this little coffee filter container looks really cool. All right, now I'm going to kind of pinch it closed at one end and then tie it up with kitchen twine. Can't just use regular string. I don't think. At least I always want to anytime kitchen twine is called for and I don't have any. I'm just like, what string do I have around? And then I always talk myself out of it. Particularly if you're going to do something in the oven. This we're putting into liquid. I don't know how that works. Who knows what's in string these days, huh? This is nice little sachet. I think it's called a sachet. S-A-C-H-E-T. All right, got that tied tight. Cutting the ends. Yeah, I think that'll hold. Groovy. Time to check on my onion again. Ooh, yeah, now we're getting charred. It's even the parts that I didn't have facing down are getting nice and blackened. Time is a miracle worker. Okay, great. Ooh, yeah. I just turned one over and it is gnarly in a good way. Call that good. Ooh, yeah, one of them is unfolding like some sort of modern art piece. We love to see it. I'm going to take these inside and stick them with some cloves. Turn our grill off here first. All right, back inside. And like I said, going to spear the onion halves with I think 2 cloves each. And I think the idea here is, in addition to the flavor, we'll kind of hold the onion halves together. And I'm honestly not sure how successful that's going to be no matter what I do, because, like I said, they got pretty darn crazy looking, is the best way I can put it, in their time on the grill. That's okay. We'll give it a try. I'm kind of doing 1 clove near each end. I'm not expecting these onions to completely hold their structural integrity the entire time. They're already freaking demolished. That's okay. I will not mind some little pieces of charred onion in the whole operation. I think it will add character. And now I'm going to drain these peas. They've been soaking overnight. They've soaked up a lot of liquid, so they've kind of expanded in the pot, and I'm just going to drain them and then go from there. Put my colander in the sink here. And I already have them in a Dutch oven. It says to use a stock pot. Maybe I should use a stock pot because I think I'm going to be adding a lot of water. So let me break that out. So, gonna throw the onion in the stock pot, put the peas in there. Ooh, the onion with the clove smells so good. Ooh, yeah, that smells fantastic. These are gonna be flavorful, I think. I don't have a ton of black-eyed pea experience, to be honest with you. Right now, as I'm emptying them out, I'm definitely getting the, sometimes the word peas and beans is used somewhat interchangeably, but I am getting very much the like pea smell. That's unfortunate collection of words, but it's true. not that kind. The more like green peas. That's kind of the smell I'm getting. Peas in the pot. Let's see. Onions are in the pot. What else needs to go in the pot? 6 quarts of water and the spice packet. All right, and I almost always feel as though the stock pot that I am using and the stock pots that are referenced in recipes are different sizes, let's say. So this one is, I just added the 6 quarts of water, and with every pint of water I was adding was feeling like, oh my gosh, this is gonna come right up to the sides. And sure enough, it did. So I'm gonna really have to watch it at the beginning. There's maybe like 1.5 inches of room at the top. And so I might go easier on the heat to begin with, just so it doesn't boil over. And like I said, just really gonna watch it, adding the sachet before I forget. Luckily that doesn't add a lot of volume, or whatever the right term is. And transferring that to the stove carefully and get the heat going. So as it's beginning to boil here, I'm going to be watching closely and trying to skim off foam that comes to the surface. Normally I like to do that with like I have like a little, there's like a fine mesh thing that I normally use. It's like has a handle on it and is great for this purpose, but you can also just use a regular old spoon. And while I'm waiting for it to come to a boil, I am going to measure out my 1 cup of olive oil and my 1 tablespoon of salt, kosher salt, that I'm going to start stirring in once it comes to a simmer. Or to a boil rather, and I've lowered it to a simmer. While we're waiting for this to come to a boil, my guest on the show today, later on in the program, Shaan Baig, the hilarious sketch comedian, LA-based. He was the co-host of the recently concluded podcast, Bollywood Boys. I have seen Shaan a ton at UCB LA. He is super, just incredibly funny and hits like an incredibly specific note of, I don't know, just like certain people on social media and out there in general that he lampoons, I guess is the word that I have backed myself into a corner in that sentence in using. And he's fantastic. I love Shaan, and I'm super excited to talk to him later on in a bit here. And as promised, here is that 1 cup of olive oil. I feel like there's certain things that you really want to use nice olive oil for. I feel like when you are putting a whole cup of it into a pot of beans, that's really when you reach for the store brand. Now measuring out that tablespoon of kosher salt. So picking up again here, it's funny, whenever I am doing a recipe where I have to skim the foam off of something, it's almost always like I'm really diligent about it at the beginning, and there's not much, but I'm getting every little bit, and then kind of chasing bubbles around the top, and then turn around, and once it's getting really heated up, then I go, oh, right, that's what I was really looking for. And there's just a ton of stuff to like skim off the top. And you can really tell the difference between just like little bubbles and foam where it's, you know, a little gritty or gnarly looking. And you're like, oh, that's why I'm skimming that off, because it's stuff that I don't want in there. But getting really close to a boil here. And like I said, I'm wanting to keep a level eye on it because it's really close to the top of the pot. And now we're really getting there. Jets of bubbles are shooting up from the bottom. So pretty much as soon as I feel like it's really boiling, I'm going to turn the heat down to a simmer and add in my olive oil and salt, stir that in gently, and now the peas are really partying, flipping and flopping from the water currents. I'm going to call that a boil just for safety. And turn the heat down, stir in this olive oil and salt. And the oil's in a little bit of a slick at the moment because I'm not able to really kind of vigorously stir because I don't want to spill over the sides. So I'm just going to kind of let it be for a minute as we simmer down, and then really get more aggressive about stirring it in later when I have more room to work with. And we're just going to kind of mostly let this go for the next hour, maybe 2 hours. It says stirring and skimming occasionally until the peas are fully cooked and the cooking liquid has thickened, 1 to 2 hours. And then at the end we're going to get rid of the spice packet and then season with some additional salt. We'll probably taste it at that point and see really kind of where we're at. And also going to add some hot sauce to taste. So we'll just see how that goes in like an hour or 2. All right, little status update. It's fully 2+ hours after I started the cook. It was slow to get really, when it was down to a simmer, it wasn't cooking down very much, so I wasn't really able to get in there and stir. And then, and I don't know what this says about the luck/omen factor of the black-eyed peas, but the sachet came undone after a little while. I feel like it got really, this is maybe where cheesecloth would have done better than a coffee filter, but it came undone. All the aromatics are kind of everywhere. It looks cooler, but I'm going to have to pick them out later. That's okay. I mean, I think basically what I've ultimately decided here is the liquid's not cooking down very fast. I feel like that might just be a stove or pot issue. So the beans are pretty well done. I mean, they're definitely cooked, but the liquid isn't that thick and it's getting kind of flavorful, but I'm really just wanting to extract more flavor. And I think what I've ultimately decided is I would rather a more flavorful mush than a more textural, bean and broth situation. I know there definitely is supposed to be liquid because it's stewed black-eyed peas. That's the point. But I'm gonna just keep letting it go for a little while longer. And no matter when I finish it, I am going to polish it off with some more salt and the hot sauce to taste. So I know I'll be able to tweak the flavors later no matter what happens, even if I don't end up extracting a ton more flavor from these aromatics. But I figure I got time. It's New Year's Day. We're not doing anything else. So in the meantime, let's talk with Shaan Baig. piece of like a salt and vinegar chip stuck in my throat. For some reason, I thought that was a really
Oh
good
man,
idea to eat
been
right
there,
before I had to
been
talk for
there.
an hour.
It's tough, dude. You need
It's
water.
yeah. Thank you for validating my experience. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I can empathize with that.
So, Shaan Baig, thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, the world is not such right now that we can actually physically share a meal. So I will just all I will can do is hope that whatever you ate last was both delicious and satisfying.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I wish we could do this in person, but it was very delicious. My wife made some chicken tikka with rice, as well as some like South Indian cabbage. I think was like the first time she made it, but yeah, incredibly delicious meal.
Oh, that sounds phenomenal. What was the cabbage like?
So my wife is the de facto cook in our house. But yeah, there's just like this kind of South Indian masala mix that goes in to a lot of that area's foods. And yeah, I mean, it's very like saffron, ginger, garlic, with like, I think like a general masala mix that goes with that cabbage that's like toasted in a pan for a little bit, but very delicious.
Ooh, that sounds fantastic. I think I should also note that I have not eaten. We're recording this in the evening, and I have not eaten yet,
Oh
and so
man.
that has gone from like sounding really good to being like, can I reach through the computer, please? That's and have the
Yeah, yeah,
leftovers.
yeah.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, you're just torturing yourself doing this, just having me describe delicious meals while you
Oh
have.
yeah, did I mention that I'm doing it from like a desert island in like a Far Side cartoon?
Right, right, right. Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah,
I'm doing entirely just like Looney Tunes style, like food. Like I'm looking at like a bear rock, and then I think it's a ham or something.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, totally makes perfect sense to do that to yourself.
It's it's a new media landscape, and I just wanted to have something to set myself apart. I don't know what
Yeah,
can I say.
it
Um,
reminds me of like, I mean, when I'd be fasting during Ramadan, like my friends were all like really cool about it in like high school, but like, man, yeah, I would just have them like describe to me whatever they were eating, just be like, oh man, like what's that pizza like you got right now? I can't I can't taste it, but I can only smell it. Please just describe it to me. And they're like, dude, like, what is wrong with you? I don't want to do this. This is like weirdly sadistic. What's going on here? But yeah, yeah, it just reminded me of that whole situation.
and I have to ask, I've never really like done anything that involved like a ton of fasting other than, maybe just like not eating before a doctor's appointment where you have to get some kind of scan. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
what is that experience like? Have you gotten better at that as the years have gone by? Do you like weirdly look forward to it? Do you look forward to eating afterwards? Like what goes into that?
Wow, wow, very good question. I mean, yeah, I think every Muslim has like their own journey with fasting, like throughout the years. Um, yeah, I mean, when I first started it, I was probably like 9 or 10, and like my parents took it easy on us. They would just make us do like half days. Um, yeah, yeah, and I didn't like it at all, of course. As a kid, you just like don't understand like the purpose of it and like what is to be gained from this. There's no like lesson to be learned. It's just like, oh, my parents like are withholding food from me. This seems like a punishment for something I like didn't do. Um, but yeah, no, over the years, like I definitely have grown to absolutely love fasting. Ramadan reminds me of a time of just like everybody getting together and like you seeing all your closest friends and family like every night for a whole month, which is just a blast. Like basically every night there will be either a potluck or like a dinner hosted by one of your family friends or yeah, your closest friends, and you all just like get together and break your fast together. So yeah, people will, often make like the best food, their favorite foods, foods that they might not make like typically throughout the year. It's just like a very special night every night. So it's like, oh yeah, it's like 30 days of a celebration. So
Oh,
yeah, I've definitely grown to absolutely love fasting.
That sounds fantastic. And just the idea that like, I mean, it also sounds daunting. Just the idea, like, how does one organize, especially as an adult, like as a kid, I'm sure you're just like, we're going to whatever house, you know, like I'm getting put in the car and
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
just getting out of the house. Like as a grown up, obviously, like I can imagine in the pandemic, it's a different thing, but like pre-pandemic, like how do you manage that social calendar, or how does that work?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so about like a month in advance, people will, send out their invitations for their iftar night. Iftar meaning like breaking the fast in Arabic. So yeah, you'll have like your whole calendar kind of lined up about a month before. Or, people might do something just on the fly if there's like, some random night that's open. People will have like a small get together. But yeah, typically we'll host like one or two throughout the month, and yeah, a whole bunch of planning will go into it, and it's just like an all day thing of cooking while you're fasting. But fun fact, if you are the one cooking the meal throughout the day, you're allowed to like taste it to make
Oh,
sure it's, yeah, 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 there's like a little,
yes.
yeah, loophole there for you.
I
uh,
really appreciate just the straightforwardness of the tradition just being like, look, we don't want it to taste bad.
yeah, 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 yeah. It's like this is supposed to be good at the end of the day, like you should enjoy this. Um,
Like it reminds me of like, I don't know if you saw, there was like a viral video, maybe it's predates this year, but a video going around this year of somebody's grandma like yelling at them being like, you don't, this is why you don't experiment on Thanksgiving. Like you screwed up the whatever it was, like the whatever you screwed up, like, which I really, really resonated with me as somebody that has both experimented on Thanksgiving or another Thanksgiving style occasion and then had it go poorly, or also
oh
just been
no.
like, let me just stick to the script. I appreciate the idea that they're like, look, people are really going to be looking forward to this. You're
Right,
allowed to
right.
like taste
Yeah,
it and make sure
yeah,
that
yeah,
it's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, God is just like, hey, don't fuck this up. Okay, this is a pretty important task you're taking on. I mean, yeah, good for you for taking on this responsibility, but I am judging you on this too.
Oh, I didn't even think about that aspect of it. It's like you're not just cooking for like your friends and family and sort of the social capital of it and a thing you're going to eat for yourself. It's sort of like there's like there's divine stakes to it.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of lessons that like people will try to focus on like throughout the day. So it's like, number one thing is like yeah, just kind of being grateful for the things that like you normally have and would take for granted, and then like suddenly if it's not there anymore, like uh you suddenly focus on it so much, so it reminds me of that. And then I think like in general, like beyond that, kind of first thought lesson is just in general being God conscious is the lesson, of just like, okay, you know, if you're constantly thinking, okay, I can't eat this, I can't drink that, past Ramadan, you'll be like just in a state of like constantly dwelling on God, and hopefully that brings you peace. Is kind of the overall lesson there.
The only thing I can really compare it to in my experience is like Lent growing up. Like I'm not a practicing Catholic, and we were pretty lax, relatively not super duper observant, but I definitely remember being a kid and being told like, okay, you're supposed to like give something up for Lent. And there's always definitely the temptation to just be like, I want to give up something I kind of don't really do. Or you know what I mean? Like I'm going to
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
game the system.
yeah, yeah.
And then having to be told like, no, the idea is you need to give up something that you actually do like
Yeah,
because you appreciate it more, kind of a sort of a similar thing of just going like,
yeah,
because Jesus sacrificed for us. And so we're kind of trying to experience that. But it also seems like relatively watered down, being like, well, the struggles that Jesus went through for us are similar to me not being able to play Game Boy for a month.
yeah, 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 100%. Yeah, yeah. I mean, on the scale, it's a similar thing.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's the argument that I'm sure I tried to make.
For sure. What are some things that like you would have wanted to give up for Lent that like weren't the actual thing? What are like your faith?
I mean, obviously there's always the like sort of like I'm giving up, something, like I'm giving up cleaning my room or whatever, that like the sort of like I feel like the like sassy Catholic cool 90s Catholic kid would
Yeah.
maybe try the like bad boy.
Right, right, right.
But that's a really good question. I mean, I think it's just sort of going like, one, not explicitly giving up something that's completely negative that you don't actually do, but I think there's just a temptation to go really, really small with
Got it. Got it. Okay.
and to not, to just sort of be like, oh, I'm not going to do this except at this time, or, like that,
Yeah.
that kind of
Okay.
thing. I genuinely, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't even really remember specifically. I mean, honestly, it must have mostly been like Game Boy and stuff, like truly just sort of like
Right.
things that I would like to do. But I also think that I was a weird kid who was already kind of like, I had like toys and video games and stuff like that, but I was also a kid who felt weirdly like queasy or ashamed about being a kid. So in a weird way, I feel like if I had to say like give up like playing, in a weird way, that to me would be, or like not literally Game Boy because I fucking loved Game Boy, but just like a Batman toy or something. There would be a certain element of like, good, more time to like pretend I'm reading Time magazine so that my parents will think I'm precocious or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I didn't know that it was it could be like anything that you love in your life. I thought it had to be food oriented. It shows how much I understand about other cultures and other religions.
Well, I mean, I think it definitely, I'm sure that it can be, and I'll bet you especially for a lot of like, I'm sure for plenty of kids, like I probably, now that I'm saying that out loud, I'm sure that I said like giving, like not doing dessert for Lent or
Right.
whatever would have been an easy and genuinely sort of like efficacious go-to for a kid. But I do think it's also like Lent and food definitely get conflated because there is the food component of like not eating meat on like Friday. I think this shows how much I remember, but like when like McDonald's filet of fish sales go like through the roof because Catholics are like eating fish one night a week and it's like an easy go-to.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's why that's in my head. It's the McDonald's of it all.
And I'm sure there's tons of like, if like an observant Catholic as a grown up, I would bet you like 8 times out of 10, they're going to be giving up like some food or drink or something that they enjoy. Like you could just imagine like somebody giving up Diet Coke and then annoying their coworkers being like, I can't have Diet Coke. And the coworkers like, I wish you could, because I'm tired of hearing about
it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean, to answer one of your earlier questions about like, does it get easier? It totally does. Like not only in the month of Ramadan, but like as the years go by, like your body just like adjusts to it and like understands that it's happening. I don't know like why that is or like what's the science behind that, but I just personally have noticed like like once a year it your body just adjusts a little faster every time and it just gets a little easier to do it, like to not have eaten anything or drank the whole day.
I wonder if there's a certain amount of just like your body, just as you get older, like I genuinely don't know how this works and this is based on nothing, but like just like knowing how I don't know, like I'm wondering if like there's a certain element of just like as you get older, you just like don't need as much food or whatever. Your body's like, you're doing a little less every year or something.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, I mean, let's just nail that theory and have people leave this podcast
that. Yeah, I do genuinely wonder, and I also think like there's a certain amount of like, I guess just as like somebody who again is not an observant Christian but still celebrates Christmas, like if there's also just an amount of like, yeah, Christmas kind of just gets like every year it just like sneaks up on you more and more as you get
Right.
further away from being a kid and your experience of time changes. And I don't know, it's very, there's really something, I don't know, there's something about those, I guess, like those festivals that when you were a kid seem so monumental that as you grow up and maybe there's just more stuff in your life and they
Right.
just kind of get crowded out. I don't know. And then I think also probably like a certain amount of just like you said, like getting better at it, being better at it, knowing that it's not the end of the world and having that
Yeah.
experience more and more every year.
Right. Right. Yeah. Another thing is um, Ramadan is on the like a Muslim lunar calendar, which like as it lines up with the Gregorian calendar, it happens to just shift 10 days earlier every year. So like, when I was a kid, Ramadan was in the winter. And now it has shifted like all the way back through the fall, through the summer, and now is going to be in like April this year. So, like, I've experienced like really long fasts in the summer, and then now the days are like getting shorter and shorter. So, like, it also like literally is now getting easier and easier because the days are getting shorter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh. That's so interesting. I mean, did you have was it like a jarring experience as you were growing up and you sort of maybe associated like, oh, I kind of associate it with being a winter thing and I just have like weird little kind of like sensory associations with that time period that as it got earlier, did it like feel wrong? Was it like, wait a minute, this is like too early?
Yeah, no, 100%. Really good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before, but I mean, totally. Like, yeah, when I was a kid, it would be around like January, December, so it felt like it was like another one of the holidays, And I just remember thinking that as a kid, like, oh, Ramadan is like right after Christmas or right around Christmas. And then like my parents explained to me, like, no, like our calendar goes back 10 days every year. So like when they were kids, they also experienced it in the summer, and they've experienced Ramadan at every point in the year. And they said, yeah, by the time you're older, like you will have experienced like Ramadan at every point in the calendar. So yeah, I remember like um, thinking like, oh man, this is so awesome that it's like right around the other holidays. Like I get to feel normal that like we're all celebrating at the same time. I can just like slip in my holiday with everybody else's. And then like I got to be less and less incognito as the years went by, and I had to explain like, oh yeah, I mean like I'm doing my Muslim thing here, and it's like not at any other holiday time. But yeah, I mean, in college it was really cool because it would kind of be like right at the beginning of the school year, like early fall. So like right when the year starts, it's like okay. Uh, it's a nice way to kind of catch up with everybody because you're seeing all your friends after the summer every single night and just hanging out.
That yeah, that's I'm just now I find myself just like fascinated by the idea that like different generations of people have had like depending on when you were born it's sort of like oh I had Ramadan when I was
Yeah.
like it was fall in college for this
Right.
person and then
Yeah.
another person like 30, 40, 50 years earlier and that they're like linked somehow. It's almost like oh, we were born in the same month or something. It's like such a
Yeah. Yeah.
unique experience or like weird way to kind of like group people together that otherwise
Right.
wouldn't have anything in common.
Right. 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 Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's yeah. I never have like really thought about how it like must affect like your memory of it as it compares like to different generations. But yeah, no, it's pretty fascinating.
Oh man, that's really I thinking about it just as as like a non-Muslim layperson, like I genuinely was like I was vaguely aware like okay, I don't think it's always in December, but I think maybe because when I was growing up and they would do and I was thinking about this year for some reason in school it was in like I was in public school in the like 90s and
Yeah.
I feel like it was like okay, it's
generally progressive enough that we're like not just being like Merry Christmas everyone and that's the
Yeah.
only thing and it's fine.
Yeah.
And but it would kind of get sort of like, so you would like around the holiday time, especially because I think all the teachers are like, we just want to like cruise into the winter break. We
Yeah.
can do just like activities in the classroom and just talk about like different holiday celebrations around the world,
Yeah.
that Ramadan would get grouped in there. But that also makes more sense if it's sort of like, well, yeah, because maybe around that time it was easy to group it in there because it was
Right.
genuinely in that zone, in
Right.
that
Right.
period in history. And now it's kind of like moved forward. I would wonder if like it's just still kind of, if they do that kind of thing in school, if they still lump it together, there's some acknowledgement that it like moves around the calendar or what. Because I do remember it kind of being like, yeah, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Ramadan,
Yeah.
those are the, like that's kind of the large categories of this kind of celebration. I wonder if that's changed at all in just sort of like American public schools, if it's still, or like in places that aren't like, don't have like large Muslim populations, if it's still kind of presented in the same way. I would be
Yeah.
fascinated to know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely remember like them just kind of like mentioning it and then feeling like the slightest bit of representation from seeing like that in like our textbook or our teacher just like talking about it for a little bit. But I mean, I wouldn't personally have like high hopes for like it being terribly changed from how it was in the 90s. Man, I mean, I just remember like later in high school, like the um, section on like um, Islam and how it had spread was just like terribly, horrifically Islamophobic. Um, and like my friends and I like tried to like get a scholar to kind of update the like what the textbook actually said, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't think like anything ever changed. I would bet that it like maybe got worse in like some areas in the country.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. So wait, but what did that campaign look like? That's so interesting. Like how did you go about trying to do that? How did it go?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was like maybe like freshman, sophomore in high school, and yeah, I don't remember exactly what was in the textbook. I just remember reading it, and it was just like, oh yeah, Islam is a religion that is like rooted in like violence and aggression, and it was just
Jesus.
yeah. I mean, it
Oh
was
my
like
God.
pretty, yeah, it was like pretty bad. It was like
Not like all those other major religions that
yeah, yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
no
Not far.
violent history whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not far from that kind of explanation. And so my friends and I were just kind of like, I mean, this is like, I mean, first of all, just like embarrassing that like this is what all our friends are gonna learn about our religion in like a formal setting, like eh, assuming that they've never like learned about it before. Um, so what we did was we like made a list of like talking points. We didn't know like how to go about this. There was no like adults uh, guiding this when there definitely should have. But like, yeah, we just kind of like butterfly revolution like got all together and we're like, no, let's like fix this shit, let's like take matters into our own hands. And we like emailed I think a couple of like the social studies teachers, and we like did a little kind of TED talk about like how Islam is like friendly and nice and how like the textbook got it wrong. um, and they just kind of like, it was during lunchtime I remember, and they just
Oh.
kind of like sat there and like focused on their lunch for a little bit. I mean, these poor teachers, they just want to get through their day, and this is the one moment that they have to like themselves. And we yeah, like gave them the
Yeah, but also they're like, it's okay. They're grown-ups who
yeah,
ostensibly are supposed to be like interested in like the
yeah,
world and
that's
also
true.
creating a safe place for their students. So I feel like you can like drop some knowledge on them during lunchtime. That's okay. I think
Right, right,
that's
right. Yeah.
totally
Oh, thank you, thank you,
reasonable.
thank you. Yeah, yeah. So we like did that. It was like me and my friend Tamam, who is now like a full on Islamic scholar. Um, and I followed a similar pursuit. I'm a comedian, and I remember we finished it, and then they just were kind of like, yeah, okay, cool, yeah. They were just like so like casual and cool about it that I was like, oh, like nothing's gonna happen. And then that was it. And then I think like we followed up like a few weeks later, and they were just kind of like, yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to like contact the publisher of this textbook and kind of like make a case towards them to have the actual like textbook rewritten. And yeah, that's when I started to think like, man, I mean, you're the teacher, like, don't you have a little bit more power about this? um, but yeah, I mean, we kind of just let it go after that, after we like stopped being sophomores and stopped being in that class, and it stopped being like, one of our main concerns. Yeah. I think like in hindsight, yeah, we probably should have gotten like an organization like CARE involved, which is like the Council on American Islamic Relations. They handle things like this, like kind of, like generally how Muslims are portrayed in the media, and like any kind of civil rights case, things like that. It definitely was not for like me and my other 15-year-old buddy at the time. We bit off a little bit we could chew,
but also like, I don't know, I feel like it's just a bummer because like in the movie version of that, like like your teacher is maybe initially skeptical, but then now they're on board, and you have this like curmudgeonly, I'm just imagining like fucking like Mandy Patinkin is now like, yeah guys, let's do it, and let's call I actually went to college with the guy who writes the textbook, and he thinks I'm a loser, but I'm gonna prove, like, I don't like then actually he's like, now you guys are a team, and it's a sort of, kind of a like Remember the Titans, but of, correcting and expanding the portrayal of like the Islamic religion in shitty like textbooks.
Yeah.
But it sounds like imagining a tired teacher being like, well, you have to contact the publisher. It's just like, okay, thanks, dude.
Yeah. I mean, man, that would have been incredible. I would have loved for any kind of help at all, but they were just kind of like, yeah, I mean, you seem to be fired up about this, so yeah, you guys can handle this. You got it.
Like, I remember believing in stuff. That was nice.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's kind of how it was. They were just kind of like, yeah, dude, I mean, we got a lot on our plate. Like, I'm sorry. But,
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's very, there is something to, or to that feeling also too of being that age and being super fired up about something. And in this case, something that is like insanely like substantive. Like I never, encountered anything like that in my high school days that was like that substantively like of an injustice, like did not happen to me. But I do feel like that feeling of being like indignant about something, and then as soon as it is no longer directly your experience, being like, and I'm not, you know what I mean? Like now I'm a sophomore. We don't have that textbook anymore. Like the feeling of like super in my experience, like super duper caring about like the drinking age and being like 21, that's crazy. And then being 21 and being like, and I don't care anymore. Why would I?
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, no, 100%. Definitely. Yeah, you got to have a little Lisa Simpson moment, and then like it's done with. It's over with. Yeah, like similarly, I'm also a dentist, and in dental school, me and my friends were like totally upset with like the way that the school was run and how they manage patients and how they manage the licensing exam, just like totally crazy, borderline unethical shit sometimes. And then there's all these plans of like, okay, well, how can we change this for like future generations? And people kind of rallied together to plan things out. And like the minute I got my license, like me and my friends were just kind of like, yeah, I mean, well, we got to like pay off our loans now. Like we're focusing on this shit anymore. And then, the cycle continues and nothing gets changed.
Yeah, right. I mean, but that is, I don't know, there is something that's just very like, just very human about that. Like that's very like, on a certain level, it's like we all kind of wish it were different, because then, like you said, like then it would be easier to create change because it would be easier to keep people invested in the same stuff over time.
Yeah.
But also there is something, it's funny you mentioned Lisa Simpson, because there is something very kind of like Springfield about
Yeah.
that to me,
Yeah,
where it's
yeah,
sort of like people super caring about something. And then it's kind of like,
yeah.
then look over there. And then everybody's just like, we don't care anymore.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
So this is, I have always been like fascinated that you are, in addition to being a hilarious character comedian, are for your, I don't even know, I mean, it feels weird to refer to it as like a day job. It's like a super day job, or I don't know. I'm fascinated, and I would love to know sort of like how it fits in with your how you build like the identity of Shaan in your own head between being a comedian and being a dentist is just like fascinating to me. So I guess let's start there, like before, right? Cause I have so many questions. It's so interesting to me, but like, how does that, how does that feel? How did that start? Like, what was the chicken and the egg there?
Right. Well, goddamn, we're about to get into therapy here, but I mean, that's what podcasts are all about. So let's do it. Yeah, I mean, kind of a long story, but yeah. So I like always, like probably deep down knew that I wanted to be a comedian. Like in middle school and high school, I would do plays, and then I don't know if you're familiar with forensics, not like the criminal investigation forensics, but like the public speaking, acting forensics.
Yes. So this is like, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I feel like we like didn't have exactly this in high school. We did have like drama club, but there were some like, you would sometimes go to like a theater conference, and there would also be like a forensics element. And it would be basically, it's like a very like formalized way of doing theatrical productions. It's kind of like theater meets speech and debate almost. Is that somewhat accurate?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the most basic way I can explain it is like it's competitive acting. So, there's speech categories, where there's like impromptu speech where you're given a prompt from current events, and then you have to come up with like, you're given 1 minute, and then you gotta come up with a 1 to 2 minute speech about that topic. It's crazy. I don't know how these high schoolers were doing it.
Oh man, that sounds like a dream that I would have, or like it's almost like a genre of dream that I would have, where it's like it's going to either go really well or really poorly, depending on what like emotionally the dream is actually about.
Yeah. I mean, complete nightmare stress dream for me. But yeah, there's another category where it's like sales. So you pick any kind of product that you like or just exists in the world, and then you do like a 5 to 10 minute speech about it with like props and easels.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I tended more towards the acting category. So I did storytelling. That was my category, where you take like a kid's story, any kind of like folklore, and you just act it out, and you do like the characters in different voices, and it's like really physical. And yeah, that was like probably my first experience like doing quote unquote like comedy, where I was like able to create voices and do like maybe an impression here or there. And then yeah, I did multiple my senior year, which is like basically like a 15-minute short play or musical. And we did Aladdin, and I played the genie. And that was like one of the most, still to this day, like one of the most fun experiences of my life, where I could just like 100% no holds barred, just be like as goofy and physical as I could possibly want to be on stage. And yeah, it was like a really kind of formative experience for me going forward. And I remember just like during that time being like, oh, I mean, in some capacity, in some way, like this is what I want to do like forever, but yeah, typical sad boy Indian story. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, and just throughout my life would just kind of be like, yeah, I mean, that's what you're gonna do. It's kind of a predetermined thing. They kind of recognized that like me and my brothers were all into like acting and comedy and music and singing. And they themselves are into like singing and are both like incredibly funny people, but are just like, at the end of the day, like in this country, you got to have something stable. This is what is like an ace in the hole. This is like what's tried and true. If you just work hard enough and like are smart enough and try your best, like you will get somewhere like with this career. They're just kind of like, yeah, I don't know about like acting, and like I don't know anybody who's done that. Like it's just a totally foreign concept. So yeah,
And we should say like
yeah.
like just removing, because I feel like we both, I'm sure, have the like interior feeling as like artists and people who were like, artistic, like kids and teenagers and whatever. There's
Yeah.
a part of us that like revolts at the idea of that, and then at the other hand you go like, from the outside it's like, holy shit, totally reasonable. You know what I mean? Like, okay, we don't know anybody who's done that. What is the success rate at that? You know what I mean? Like I now, as like a grown up, I can hear that a little bit detached from it and be like, I get what you're saying.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And especially like now being on the other side of things, like, yeah, I mean, every day I just like more and more understand like my parents' perspective. I'm just like becoming my parents by the minute. Um, but yeah, anyway, like in college, I just like totally just buried that part of myself. I was just like, I mean, it's just that's it, like this is reality, this is the real world. Like I gotta just like focus on being pre-med. And yeah, I mean, I did well in my pre-med classes. Um, I think I like partly because I'm just like a hard worker from like seeing my parents. Um, I don't think I'm like naturally drawn to science in any way. I think it's more of just like a skill that was born out of like trying to make my parents still love me. So I was just like, yeah, I just gotta get these A's. So I just like became this like I was doing like pre-med drag, of just like is what I would describe it as. I'm just like, um, type A kind of student. I was like that asshole that would like raise my hand and answer questions in the organic chemistry class. Um, yeah, to try to get like a rec letter. Totally just like douchebag. But yeah, just like study till my eyes pop out of my head every day at the library. I was just like, I need to get this done. I need to like get into medical school. I don't know if I ever thought about it really like beyond that. I was just kind of like, I need to get into medical school just because like that is the hurdle of my life. And I just like need to prove to myself and my parents and my community that I can get in, that I'm not, just like some goofy guy that
Did you feel like that doubt existed outside of yourself? Did you feel like people looked at Shaan specifically and went like, I don't know if he can do it?
I think so. I mean, I don't know how much of it was like what people really thought and how much of it was like from, my own insecurities. But yeah, definitely that was a fear of like, oh, I think people think of me as like the guy who like is into plays and has his head in the clouds and like, oh, like doesn't take life seriously as much as like these other brown dudes who are like, oh yeah, from day one, just excelling in science and, you know, uh, crushing the SATs or whatever, get into Ivy League schools. I definitely thought like, oh, okay, I'm looked at as like a somewhat like kind of different breed. And I was out to like prove that wrong of like, no, like, yes, I'm like, a little silly Billy, but I'm also like, smart and I can do well in school and I can get into medical school too. I think that was part of it. Um, so yeah, I remember like at the same time there's also these like Indian cultural shows that go on during college. So like yeah, once a year, like the Indian Students Association will get together and like put on a series of dances, and that was my little kind of like silver lining of like keeping my head down in the books was like, okay, this once a year I get to like actually perform in some capacity. And I've always loved to dance, so we would do that. And then I remember my senior year, the last time we did the Indian cultural show, I got off stage and like it really, really hit me at that moment where I was like, I think this is the last time I'm ever going to perform on stage.
Oh,
Like yeah, it was like horrendous. I went from like having so much fun time in my life, like going crazy, doing this like really like kind of goofy South Indian dance, which is its own kind of like really funny hip hop style. It's really kind of hard to describe, but yeah, just like the high of that to just immediately boom, just walking into the backstage dressing room, being like, oh shit, I think that's the last time I get to like do what I love.
Oh.
And then this like slow onset happened like throughout my senior year, where I just kept thinking about that. Then I eventually like got into medical school at Virginia Commonwealth, and man, it was just like another like extreme emotion of holy shit, this is like what I've been chasing my whole life. I can finally like show it to like my parents and like my whole community and my family, like, yeah, like I had what it takes, you know, like I can do this, you know. um and yeah, my parents are just like completely elated, and my brothers are so happy. And honestly, like right after that, like that drive to like do that and like excel in that world like completely just melted away. Like I got the thing, I earned it like my own way. I just like had my horse blinders on and accomplished it. And then like any drive I had related to medicine or like the world of healthcare completely just went away. And I just kind of like, you know, coasted the rest of my senior year and like did well enough. And then um, near the end of my senior year, um, one of my friends who's also pre-med was like, "Hey man, like what are you going to do like right after we graduate?" And I was just like, I mean, I think I'm just going to like kick it at home for a little bit and, you know, spend time with family before like I start school in the fall." And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking like, you know, we've been working so hard and just been consumed by all things pre-med for like 4 years. I mean, realistically, probably 8 years, including high school. You know, I need some time to like take a break. Like I've been thinking," he was saying, "to like maybe do a year of research or like travel for a little bit, take a year off, and then get back into this like rat race of like, you know, medical school and then residency and then, you know, fellowship and whatever, blah blah blah, like, you know, this whole never ending path." And man, that was enough to like really just unlock this thing in my head of like, you know, well, I'm done with school, I did the thing, I just kind of like twiddling my thumbs until medical school starts. And you know, I went to school at Loyola Chicago, so I was in Chicago, and I was like, man, like I've always loved comedy, I've always like wanted to do this is the thing that I really want to do. Second city and Io, Chicago are like right here. What if I like took a year off and like did that stuff for a year? And then the moment like I started to really think about that, like in the library that day that my friend talked to me about this, I was like, oh, this is what I've always wanted to do, like fuck medical school, you know? And man, like I was like equal parts like really excited and inspired to like explore that world that I've always wanted to, but also like terrified of like, oh my God, telling my parents, you know? Because I knew that like any little inkling of entertaining that thought would be like, oh, he's gonna like, you know, just snowball and just do comedy, you know?
Right.
So I like wrote a letter to like my medical school, just like asking them if this is possible. And they were like, yeah, it is possible. You can do it for a year. And I was like, okay, cool. Can I do that, please? And they're like, yeah, totally. Like, just like totally defer for a year. And my parents were like, surprisingly, like really cool about it. Like, they were just like, hey, you know what? Like, you've worked your ass off. You did really well in school. You took the goddamn MCAT, which is a nightmare. Like, yes, you can do this. This is like your reward, you know? Like, why don't you just like hang out in Chicago and do that? But, you know, you got to go to medical school right after. So yeah, pretty much like the second like they approved it, I was like locked into being like, oh, I'm never going to medical school. I was like, they don't know what they just did, but like, but I'm gonna be a comedian, you know. So I mean, a truly like magical year. This is exactly like 10 years ago in Chicago, where I just like stayed on Loyola's campus and roomed with my undergrad buddies for a year, and then like would I was taking class at IO Chicago and Second City at the same time, and so I just had the absolute time of my life. Like met like for the first time, I felt like, oh, these are really like-minded people who have like the same sensibility, same sense of humor as me. These people like get me. This is like the most fun thing. You know, that thing that happens when you like start at an improv theater. You're like, holy shit, this is like a temple. You know,
Yes.
These are my people. This is where I belong in the world. I don't belong in the library. Goddamn. And then, um, and then, like I had this thing in my head of like I got to accomplish something big in this year to like prove to my parents like, oh, like you can let medical school go. I mean, I was like 22, just totally unrealistic idea of the world. And I remember this is so embarrassing to say out loud, but like I have to say it because it's so naive and like, I mean, really fucking stupid and hilarious. But I remember like in my improv class, like our improv teacher, Todd Edwards, was like, hey, like this is IO Chicago. This is a really cool place. Like, you know, you're going to learn a lot of cool things here, meet a lot of cool people. And, you know, this was right when like Vanessa Bayer and Paul Britton had gotten on us.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had just gotten on. I started improv class there. And he was like, yeah, those were like my buddies. You know, those are my friends. And, you know, this is your first day of improv class here. And just know that like, if you stick with this and like you meet like people who like you have a lot of fun collaborating with, like, you know, extraordinary things are possible like that. But it does take like dedicated work and it takes a long time. And like Paul Britton, you know, he started 8 years ago and it took him 8 years to get on SNL. And I was like, at that time, I was thinking, God damn, 8 years. I got to get on SNL in 1 year. I got to do it this year.
That's just an extraordinarily like it's just an extraordinarily 22-year-old thing to think.
I mean, yeah, not even 20. That's like a 15-year-old thought. Now I'm thinking about it now. But yeah, I remember thinking like, okay, I have this time limit on me. I gotta like medical school is like, you know, on the clock at the end of this year. I got to accomplish something like incredible, so big like that, so that my parents can be like, okay, yes, you can do comedy. So I like pitched a show to like the smaller Skybox Theater. I don't know how familiar you are with Second City, Chicago. I put on a sketch show with some of my friends from improv class. And it was just like the most fun I had up until that point of just like, okay, I never like written my own sketches before that moment or like written my own characters. And like, it just felt like so natural. It just felt so like, holy shit, like this is really what I'm supposed to do. You know, this is what like my body is made to do. My body is meant to body roll and like do weird shit on stage. I'm supposed to be like, being a total goofball. I'm not supposed to be like, you know, diagnosing people with cancer. It's just that it's not what I'm meant for.
But I mean, a body roll will make that news potentially go down a lot easier. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. In true dramatic Bollywood-esque flair, as the summer's winding down, I was figuring out, okay, how do I like talk to my parents about this? How do I open this conversation? And I wrote truly dramatically a 11-page handwritten letter telling my parents about how I've never wanted to be a doctor, how I love them for like instilling certain values in me, and how like I think I can apply those same values of like discipline and hard work towards like a career in comedy, which I think I'm much more suited for. And I just like walked up to my mom. I was just like, hey, like, just read this. When you're done, like, let's talk about it. So my mom just like started reading and just like came to my room afterwards, and just like the most harrowing walk from my bedroom door to like my desk. And she just like sat down and was just like, hey, like, what do you want to do like in life? Like what kind of things do you want? And I mean, I just kind of like expounded upon whatever I said in the letter. And she wasn't like angry. She wasn't like that, like stern with me or anything. She wasn't, crying or anything, but we just had like a really frank discussion, which we had never like had about my career up until that point. And then after like several hours, like I just kept being like, yeah, I mean, I don't think that like medical school is like right for me. I need something that's going to give me like more flexibility. If you really want me to have like a stable career to like support my career in comedy, like it just can't be medicine, which is this all encompassing, overwhelming career that involves like medical school, residency, fellowship, all this stuff. I just can't do something like comedy on the side if I'm doing that. And then I was just like, well, I mean, what about dentistry? Truly, where I am today is because of that, like, spur of the moment thought. Where I was just, this throwaway thought that I thought was just like, okay, well, what if I try this out? Throwing spaghetti at the wall, I changed the rest of my life. And,
Oh.
and I was like, it's a little bit more flexible. You don't have to do residency. I could try to get into a school in like New York or LA, to try to make like, the opportunities a little bit better for me for comedy. And then my mom was like, okay, that's not a bad idea. And I was like, okay, great. Well, I'll apply next year for it and I'll take like another year off to do comedy in Chicago. And she's like, no, 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 no. You're still going to medical school, which is in a couple months, and you'll apply to dental school at the same time. If you get into dental school, then you can leave medical school and then you can switch your path that way. And I was like, well, the application cycle is already well underway. I have to take the DAT. I have to get rec letters. I have to do all this stuff. And she was just kind of like, well, I mean, that's kind of the compromise I'm willing to give you. That's a compromise for like Indian parents. And so I got back into my like horse blinder pre-med mode. And, like I had taken all the pre-med courses and done well in them. And I had taken the MCAT, which is like probably 100 times harder than the DAT. And I was like, okay, I think I can maybe do this. So then I was like ready to go to Virginia to medical school in like a couple months. And I was like, okay, every day from this point forward in like July or so, I'm going to study my ass off for the DAT. So I did. And I just like called all my pre-dental buddies. I was like, what do I need to do? How do I study this? And there's like a perceptual ability test on the DAT, which is like a complete mind fuck. You have to like look at like weird 3D puzzle piece shapes and like try to figure out what hole that shape would go into. You have to figure out like what angle is bigger than the next in ascending order. And they're like barely different than each other. Just insane, just like, troll under the bridge questions that are on this test. And so, in another true dramatic fashion, I ended up taking the DAT on the morning before my white coat ceremony in Virginia for medical school. So you get your score right away. And my heart is just like pounding out of my chest because I'm just like, okay, I think I did okay on this test, but like this number will also like determine the rest of my life. So then I did really well. And I was like, okay, that's it. That's my ticket. And then I just kind of like was a horrible med student, like the rest of the time. Like all my friends in medical school were just kind of like, what is up with this guy? Like he's never in lab. He's never like studying or shit. But I'm just like in my apartment, like, holy shit, like I got it. Like SNL is just a few months away. And then, long story short, even though I've done nothing to make this story shorter at all, I got into a school in Chicago, and then I was able to like leave med school and then come home. Then I got an interview at USC and was like, okay, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna change my whole life, I might as well go to Hollywood, baby. So so I interviewed there, got into USC, and then then moved over to LA, started making like YouTube videos, started taking UCB classes, and here we are.
Oh my gosh. I mean, also just imagining like the idea of you, first of all, okay, wait, first question off of that.
Mhm.
What in the name of Harry Potter is a white coat ceremony?
It's very, very Harry Potter-esque. Yeah, so white coat ceremony is like uh, at the end of the orientation week in med school, dental school, pharmacy school, I think optometry school. They announce the class to like an audience of everyone's parents and family and friends. So just one by one, like a graduation ceremony.
Wow.
Each student one by one, and then like one of the faculty members will put a white coat on you and like slip it under you and be like, okay, now you're officially starting this path of like becoming a healthcare provider. So yeah,
Gotcha. So yeah, so I mean, I was just the entire time I'm imagining like just the dramatic irony of you being like, oh my gosh, I really hope I get into dental school, and the idea of how many, and this is no disrespect to dentists, the dental profession, obviously so important, but like how many other med students, the path that you were so desperate to get on and working hard to get on must be their nightmare.
right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Like the idea of
Yeah.
being like, wait, I'm working really hard to get into medical school. I would maybe have dental school as like a fallback. And you know what I mean? Like that for you was like, I'm hoping for that is what I'm like aiming for.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, like I I started to like think about like the seats that I was like taking, and I like earned that like somebody who's really passionate about like would have wanted like later on. But yeah, no, totally. Like it's all like about the perspective that you have when you're going for those seats.
Right. And I also think, I don't know, there's something that's so like, and again, I think like this just comes from like a, I just think about something about the story and like how many times on that path, and still to this day, I would imagine you have to think about and are thinking about and evaluating like the stakes of your
Yeah.
life. Like, what does my life mean? What does my career mean? What do I really want to do? What
Right.
are the stakes of that? What are the trade-offs?
Yeah.
Where I do feel like and I think I'm not talking about a particular exact type of person here, but I think that we've both been doing comedy long enough that we know people. And I will say, as a straight white dude, it often is a lot of straight white dudes, especially now, where you almost feel like comedy is like a default.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
you want to be, where you sort of are like, wait a minute, you're not. And I have had a tremendously gilded path in like comedy and in my career, and I have gotten incredibly lucky in addition to all of the privilege that I have in many ways. But like the amount of just like that some people that you do encounter where you're like, so many people, and you are certainly one of them, where it's like, this is my dream. This is everything I want. This is what I'm going for. I understand what the stakes are. I understand what the trade-offs are.
Yeah.
And then you also know people where they're sort of like, I wanted to do comedy because it kind of seemed fun. And so I'm doing it, and whatever. And you're just like, wait, what?
Yeah.
You don't like need to do it in spite
Yeah.
of all else. Like, this is just something that you know what I mean? Like, where you're just like, this is just a choice on the buffet of choices for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think definitely in like my Chicago classes, and then certainly in the LA classes. I mean, this, it totally runs the gamut of like, people who are like driven to do this and are like so obsessed with it. And then, like people who are, models or actors and are just like trying to pepper their resume or something. Chicago was like really interesting in that way, where it was like, like improv is so embedded into the culture of Chicago, where it's just like, anybody like has done an improv class,
Right.
in our class. There was like this lady who was like a 50-year-old electrician, who was like also like an amateur softball player, and she was really passionate about that. There was like literally like a 75-year-old Jewish grandmother in our class who was like the funniest one in the class, but like had obviously no aspirations for comedy at all. And
She was also like, I have to get SNL this year for different reasons.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. She tried to make it happen in 1 year and it turned into 50. So yeah, that was my cautionary tale. But yeah, just like a really diverse class of people throughout the years. But yeah, definitely a mindfuck when it's like, oh yeah, this isn't like what's keeping you up at night. This is just something that you're doing for fun. Like that's crazy.
Oh yeah, and I should say like I completely like value and treasure, especially, and I just think you don't see it as much in LA, or at least again, pandemic, everything's off the table, like whatever, it's completely different. But like pre-pandemic, like LA, primarily the person you're seeing in improv class is using it as a means to an end. And I think it's like those people that you encounter that are like using comedy as a means to an end, as opposed to like people who are going like, I'm an artistic person. I've always been interested in comedy, so I want to try this out. Like I have nothing against any of those people. That is like, I don't have anything against any of these people really. I just think it's interesting. But like those people truly are the like, the spice of improv class, and what makes it wonderful sometimes is just like knowing people from so many different backgrounds coming in, bringing their own thing to it and being like, holy shit, what's this person's perspective? This is really cool. And some of the best people that or the like funniest, most interesting people I've ever known, including a lot of people who are very successful comedians, is like somebody who did something before. You know?
100%. Yeah. I mean, somebody who like, isn't like laser focused on, the quote unquote career path of like improv and sketch, and is just, bringing their really rich life experience to the class, and they're just like oftentimes really present and just, having a lot of fun in the moment. And they're not really thinking about, their career aspirations as, it relates to improv,
Exactly. There's more of a like just childlike sense of like that improv 101 feeling of like, this is fucking awesome. This is like playing. This is really cool. This is really fun. This is really creative, as opposed to like, this has to work because I have to do X with my,
100%.
with my life. But like, so cut to today, or I guess I should potentially more in like a pre-pandemic world of like, you're performing, you're doing, shows, and you're also a dentist. Like, how do you balance that? What do your patients like know about it? Do you feel like a desire to keep them sort of separate? Like, how does that function?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously incredibly difficult to balance. So, I mean, it was a little easier, honestly, before this year, because my brother and I just started our own practice back in March, right at the start of the pandemic. Perfect timing. And before that, in the years right after I graduated in 2016, I was an associate, meaning I didn't own the practice, but I would show up for like a couple days a week at different practices around LA and just do like a couple days work. And just kind of fill out my schedule, just like I'm in Koreatown one day, then I'm in East LA one day, and downtown another day. And so I would be able to like plan out my schedule in such a way where, on show days for like Mod Night or Characters Welcome, whatever, I would like just tell them that I'm not available, because on show days, man, I just like get so in my head, and I'm the type of person that needs to like focus on kind of one thing at a time, even though like it kind of seems like I'm not doing that at all. But like as the days go, when there's a lot of tasks in front of me, I try to break it up as much as I can,
Sure.
So on those show days, I'm just like, no, I'm fully in the zone. I'm just in comedy mode. I'm just thinking about my piece and just thinking about my sketches. And then, we do the show and then switch back into like dentist mode, and 8 a.m. and drilling and filling the next day. But like in terms of like the worlds colliding, I definitely try to keep them like as separate as possible. Like it's definitely my personal hell for like my patients to like know that I do comedy, or like to have seen any of my videos or anything, because there's just this thing of people who are not in the comedy world. If they know that you do that, they're just like, oh, okay. Well, just do a little voice for us now. Do a little impression. Like, let's see a little something. And I'm just like, nah, I don't want to do that at all. Like, you can just, the videos are there. You can check them out. I'm not gonna dance for you right now. I think like I was like with a group of people, um, a bunch of like Muslim people, and this like older dude was with them, and like somebody told them that I do a Deepak Chopra impression, and he just like kept like hammering it, and I just refused to do it, and then he like literally said the words like after a couple minutes he was like, "Come on, dance, monkey dance," and I was like, "Oh, what
Oh,
the fuck?" Like,
oh.
no, 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 no. I'm definitely not doing it. And also, fuck this guy forever. Yeah. So that's like totally my nightmare is like getting into that situation of like somebody putting me on the spot and like being like, oh, like do something now, you know? So I definitely try to keep them as separate as possible.
That yeah, I can only imagine, and I do think there is a weird, just sort of like, I think most people feel that way about like there, where you're like, to other comedians, I want to be like, I'm a comedian, but to like pretty much anyone else, it's like I do writing or I do,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like you
Right.
want to keep it as general as possible because there is the
Yes.
expectation of sort of like now tell me a joke where you just want to be like, I don't know, how many comedians do you know that just like tell you a joke on an airplane or something, I don't know, like
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
is that your expectation of how
Right.
that
Right. Right.
works? I guess I understand why people don't know and it's fine and there are bigger problems, but it
Right. Right.
is very, if for any comedian, it is truly a skin crawling moment, the moment of sort of like, do what you do without any of the implements or context of doing it, where it
Yeah.
is just like, yeah, I wouldn't give a fucking root canal on stage at UCB
Yeah.
Sunset,
Yeah.
RIP.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I yeah, that is what I say too. If I like find myself in a sticky situation where like they've just found out that I do comedy, I'm just
Right.
like what I say is I'm into comedy writing. So I distance myself enough from like the
Perfect.
performance
Perfect.
aspect so that
Uh-huh.
they don't put me
Uh-huh.
on the spot, you know?
And so like how does I would be really interested to know how your being a dentist like affects your relationship with food, because when I think of like dentists, or I remember like a couple years ago my dentist was like, oh, do you have like this kind of like weird discoloration, do you drink like a lot of like beer or something? And I was like, no,
Uh,
not really. She was like, do you drink like whatever? And she was just asking me about like carbonated beverages, and then I was like, oh, like maybe like LaCroix? And she was like, oh, maybe that might be it. Because I was just like, yeah, I'm drinking like 3 cans of it at a time at that
yeah.
time. And
Right.
just like, I just think of dentists as having an odd or adversarial potentially relationship with like what their patients are putting into their mouths. Does it affect how you eat? Does it affect how you view how other people eat?
Right, right. Um, Good question again. So I kind of think like dentists as they relate to food or think about food, fall into like maybe two different categories. Like there are definitely like the very kind of health conscious dentists that are very aware of like snacking can build up over time and cause cavities. They try to stay away from sugar, try to stay away from like diet drinks because they're more acidic than the regular drink.
Interesting.
And so, yeah, they're very, very conscious about that. I am in the different category where I like have a huge sweet tooth. I'm like constantly just like snacking on chips or like Sour Patch Kids or whatever. But across the board, for all dentists and hygienists as well, like we're all really big on oral hygiene. That is the thing. So
Sure.
like I like know inside and out, like, okay, like, of course, like, yeah, what are the ramifications of like not like flossing for like even a couple weeks? So, like, that's the thing I try to like hammer home to my patients about anything like beyond like food habits or anything. I just like go over, okay, this is how you floss, and you got to do it every day, or else that plaque's going to build up. You're going to get a cavity, then you mouthwash, then you brush your teeth. So that is really like the gospel that I try to teach is like oral hygiene techniques, not so much like food, because like, yeah, there's a whole, uh, culture around food and what's good food, what's bad food, that people like feel shame about that. Like, I don't want to like go down the path of when I have patients in my office. Like, that's for like a different doctor to deal with. So I'm like, okay, let me just like go over the oral hygiene.
That makes sense. I appreciate that. It's like you only want to fight so many battles, or just being like, okay,
Yeah.
this is like the thing that you trust, that as my patient, that I have, like, this is my lookout. This is the world that I
Yeah.
care about. This is my wheelhouse.
Yeah. I'm just like, hey, I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I'm not going to eat a chocolate chip cookie right after I see you. Like, that's going to happen, you know? Like, I can't be like giving you, lessons on oral hygiene while there's like Sour Patch sugar hanging off of my lip, you know? Like, I have to be realistic here.
Is there anything that you had mentioned earlier, that your wife kind of is the sort of like de facto chef of the family? Is there a particular thing that you find yourself like responsible for, or that you like to cook, or like an end of the sort of like culinary part of your family that you feel like you hold up, or are particularly passionate about?
Man, I wish I had more cooking skills, but yeah, for a time, maybe not so much anymore. I like handled desserts whenever there
Oh.
was like a big family gathering, or a holiday celebration. I would like make the brownies, make the cookies, make the pecan bars or whatever, and then like what happened was like my brother started to get really into cooking, and he's like an incredible cook now. It
Mm.
started as like a really kind of you know um, small little interest in high school, and then it just really blossomed into, no, that's like a huge part of his personality now. He's like one of the best cooks I know. And so he started to handle a lot of that. And then like my older brother got married, and his wife Hira is like an incredible cook as well, and also like does amazing intricate desserts. Like, she can cook like macaroons, death by chocolate, any kind of pie you would want, cupcakes. Like, yeah, just like knocks it out of the park anytime. And then also my wife is an incredible cook too. So I like have kind of just like drifted away and been like, hey, I think you guys got this. I'll just be over here. I'll handle the music while you cook.
And meanwhile, Sean's pecan bars are obsolete at the
Yeah,
family
yeah, hundred
gathering.
percent. Yeah, yeah. I was like Woody in Toy Story. They just like forgot.
Oh man. Yeah, it sounds like do you, is there any part of you that senses that food is for your brother, who you have the practice with, what comedy is to you?
Interesting. I definitely know that that's a huge part of like his life and his personality, but his drive, his like passion that he is in love with is music. So he's always loved like playing guitar. He was in like a couple bands in high school, and I think like he's not like as driven to pursue a career in it as I am about comedy. But I think like if he could do anything and make a career out of it, like it would be music, I think.
That's so that's really interesting. And then there's a part of him that's just a guy who's in a band, so there's a certain element of just like, oh, also whatever, you know.
Right, right. Yeah.
That's my guy
That's
in a band stereotype, I think. It's just
answer.
this
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is just being like, oh, I mean, cool, we'll see. Um
Yeah, 100%.
oh man, I it is like, I don't know, it is, do you have then like what food is for him? Do you have like a thing where you're like, this thing for me is truly just a hobby? Because I feel like until I started doing a podcast about it, and it still is to a degree, and I like vacillate between them and
Right,
whatever, but like food and
right.
cooking is still, thankfully for the most part, like just a pure like hobby, and a thing for me that I am passionate about, but it's just a thing that I just purely enjoy, that I'm not trying to do like for a living. Is there
Right.
a thing that is that for you?
Honestly, I don't think so. I think I'm, yeah, like the type of person who like I can only be like all in on like a few things at a time. Like, I'm either in 100% dentist mode, and then as soon as I take my scrubs off, I'm like, okay, I start like my mind starts churning about comedy. You know, like I just keep like oscillating between those two different modes. I probably should have something to like just like be my hobby, that so that I'm not in this like hyper intense, I gotta produce stuff mode. But I think for a time when I was doing the podcast, the Bollywood Boys podcast, that was my like hobby, I would say, you know, because it's not that I didn't care about it. It was just like, oh, I feel like the stakes are considerably lower, and I'm just like, you know, goofing off with my friend Sagar on this podcast. You know, I felt like it's truly just like a way for me to be doing something active, and that I'm, you know, definitely have all my wits about me and I'm firing on all cylinders. But at the end of the day, like I don't feel like the stakes are that terribly high with it, you know?
Right. That makes sense. I think like, and also too, it's just sort of like, and there's a subject matter, there's a thing you guys are talking about that it's just like, we're passionate about it. We enjoy it. It's obviously, it is entertainment and we're trying to be entertainment, but we're not, we are in the entertainment world, but we're also not trying to be in Bollywood movies. So there is a
Right.
sort of like
Right.
distance there where we just get to be like fans.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, wow, that's very profound. Nobody's articulated it quite like that before, but yeah, no, that is 100% what it was that, yeah, we were distanced enough from it because it's a totally different film industry in a different part of the world, but culturally we are related to it and we grew up watching it, you know?
That's awesome. I mean, yeah, it's like, you know, and I think like that also too is just like a phase of life thing as well. It's just sort of like
Yeah.
sometimes like your hobbies or your things that you are there, you have more time and space and room for them, or they're just like serving a larger purpose somehow. And then other times it's like, yeah, it kind of like, to me, it just sounds like, oh shit, you're really busy and you're trying to make this thing happen. And you have a really very intense, like actual like job and thing that you're
Yeah.
in, you know, that you have that like, so it does make sense to me that it's not like you're like, oh yeah, I fucking, build model ships or whatever, you know, like that tracks.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be a truly insane person if I had like if I was like also an optometrist on top of this shit.
Oh, I would love to meet the hobbyist optometrist for
Yeah, there's
sure.
definitely some brown guy out there who's like one upped me in that way. I would bet on it.
So, Shaan, final question: if there was anything in the world that maybe it's something that you ate all the time growing up, or maybe it's something that you and your wife ate at a restaurant once that you loved,
Mhm.
or anything in between. If there is one thing that you could snap your fingers and know how to make from scratch perfectly, what would it be?
Oh man. Uh, Without a doubt, it is my mom's lamb biryani. I don't know if you've had biryani before or if you're familiar with the dish.
I have made a biryani before. My brother a couple years ago got me the cookbook for a restaurant in from Washington D.C. called Rasika.
Okay.
That I made the biryani from that. I think I ended up tracking down because it was like they were like, it's goat, but you can do lamb. And I was like, I have a ton of time on my hands. It's winter break. I love this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to track down goat. And I think I did. I think we did a goat one for New Year's Eve a couple
Oh,
years
nice.
ago. But
That's,
I've never actually had a one that was made by somebody that actually knows what they're doing. It turned out really well because you're just like correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like it's like a sort of like a celebratory dish. Like it's
yeah.
like
Yeah, it's not your everyday dish. It is just like the dish that every South Asian person would probably say that their mom makes the best, more than anybody else.
sure.
Um, and yeah, there's several hundreds of different versions, like as you span the South Asian subcontinent. But like the one that my mom makes, I think it goes back to my maternal grandmother's brother was the one who like started making it and like perfecting it, and then has just like been passed down from there, and like
Oh
my mom
man.
was the one who like inherited it. But her version, I mean, it's just this like gorgeous medley of saffron and cloves, ginger, garlic, butter, rice, lamb, fried onions, just like a million ingredients that like really complement each other in this like beautiful way that just like keeps changing and like revealing itself to you as you're eating it. Oh my God, I could talk forever about biryani. It is just like the most complex, incredible, like crown jewel of dishes in India. And yeah, my mom was like famous for it growing up. And yeah, I mean, she's a dentist, and you know, would do her best to like, yeah, make us dinner at the end of the day, and would always do a great job. But that was the thing where it's like, okay, if she's making biryani, like that's a special moment, you know. And if we were hosting like a dinner at the mosque or something, like the whole community would know, like, oh, we're gonna get some biryani from the Baig family. And yeah, it would just, she would make it in these like huge vats in the mosque
Oh,
kitchen all day. And so like me and my brothers, when we're like, you know, uh, in our early teens, would just like be her little sous chefs in the kitchen, just like throwing cloves in the vat at like this at 1 o'clock. And then at like 2 o'clock, you got to put like this amount of butter in. It's just this all day marathon of cooking for
oh,
like hundreds of people. And then, yeah, when it's served, like it's so good, it would just be gone like that, like in a flash, because people
oh,
are so excited about this biryani. It's just something about like the lamb that she makes. Like lamb can sometimes be kind of dry and like not blend in well to like its surroundings that well. But like the way that she makes it and the way that she's like, you know, kind of marinating the lamb overnight, and it's just like sitting in this like really pungent, delectable stew of spices, and then she mixes it with the rice the day later. It really kind of blends in well with the rice, and is really moist, and yeah, just absolutely delicious. But that is a thing where I'm like, man, like I wish I could know how to make that, or just snap my fingers and it's like appears in front of me. But I think my brother is going to be the he's going to inherit that recipe and be the one who makes it for like our generation.
oh, no wonder he's been trying to like, he's been like, I'm getting better at cooking. He's just
Yeah,
angling for the recipe.
yeah. I mean, he would do an outstanding job. I mean, I wish everybody on earth could like try my mom's biryani. Like, it's just that good. It's like the best thing I've ever eaten.
Oh, that sounds phenomenal. And then small nugget that you dropped in there. I mean, we have to wrap up. So I'll just let your therapist take this one from here. But your mom is a dentist?
Yeah. So she's a dentist, and my dad's a pediatrician. So that's where, you know, the high expectations for a career in healthcare came from. Um, but yeah, so I mean, it is like weird that, you know, at first glance, like she wanted me to be a doctor specifically. Um, but yeah, I think because she just kind of thought, okay, um, this is what was like kind of available to me, like coming to the country, like these are
Right.
the cards that were on the table. But she's like brilliant woman, incredibly hardworking. She like, you know, could have done anything and is a fantastic dentist. But for us, she was always just like, no, like absolutely, like just shoot for the moon, like go for like the most prestigious thing you can possibly go for, you know. um so yeah, that is what all my brothers dealt with.
Oh,
Was,
wow. Yeah. I mean, fuck, man. Yeah. I, that, I mean, it's a lot, but it's also like, it's funny how we've been in the context of this conversation,
yeah.
that like treating dentist like, and then, you know, fallback like dentist when you, as you're saying, it's like this incredibly hard
Yeah.
thing. It's super important. Like it's super important for like our health and the fact that we can even eat food, which is what this podcast is about and what like life is like composed of. And we've just been being like, and you know, and then obviously, you know, and then you could just, you know, just go be a dentist or whatever.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I think we just have to end on a note of respect for the dental profession,
Yes.
envy that you've had and participated in the making of the biryani, and envy for your brother that he's going to end up with the recipe. And just thank you for doing this, man. This was so incredibly fun. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a blast, man.
All right, that is it. That is all for this week's episode of Stay for Dinner. Thank you so much to my guest, Shaan Baig. He is absolutely... He's the best. I had such an amazing time talking to him, hearing his story. If you want more Shaan, please check out The Get Brown, his sketch group at The Get Brown on Twitter, his YouTube page, Notorious Baig, Notorious Baig on YouTube, and the Bollywood Boys podcast is still out there. Check that out, the Bollywood Boys catalog, and he's on Twitter at Notorious Baig and at I Like Birds, BURDZ on Instagram. That is it for me. I am at DEECEE Pierson on Instagram. I am at DC Pierson on Twitter. If you like the show, please rate and subscribe to it wherever you do that for podcasts. I've written a couple of novels, The Boy Who Couldn't Sleep and Never Had To, and Crap Kingdom. They are out there. Please support your local independent bookseller. And that's it. That's the first show of 2021. I was really happy to share it with Shaan and really happy to share it with you. Have a good rest of your week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.